What if your biggest monthly home expense just vanished? Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is pushing for a radical idea, completely eliminating property taxes for homeowners, framing it as true freedom from what he calls paying rent to the government. It's a proposition that sounds almost too good to be true for millions of residents. But a shocking new in-depth analysis from Realtor.com uncovers a dramatic chain reaction this would set off. The plan could instantly supercharge home values by nearly double-digit percentages, creating a massive immediate wealth transfer. But this windfall has a direct cost. It would be paid for by renters, first-time buyers desperate to get into the market, and could potentially set a fiscal trap that leaves the entire state vulnerable in the next recession. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the mechanics, the money, and the long-term risks. Who truly benefits? Who gets left behind? And is this a sustainable vision for Florida's future? Let's break down the details. First, let's understand the current landscape. For months, Governor DeSantis has argued that property taxes are a form of double taxation and fuel inefficient, bloated local governments. His unambiguous goal is a state constitutional amendment to reduce and ultimately eliminate these taxes, specifically for homesteads, Florida's legal term for owner-occupied primary residences. He proposes replacing the lost billions in revenue by increasing reliance on the state's other major income streams, sales tax, corporate income tax, and critically, by continuing to fully tax every property that is not a primary home. This includes rental apartments, vacation houses, and commercial buildings. The philosophical argument is about absolute ownership, but the economic implications are vast and complex, touching every single person in the state. To gauge the impact, we need to look at Florida's housing market right now. After a meteoric rise during the pandemic, prices have shown signs of softening. As of late last year, home values per square foot were down about 3% from their 2022 peak. However, zoom out, and the picture is stark. Prices remain a staggering 42% higher than pre-pandemic levels in 2019. This increase has drastically outpaced income growth, putting homeownership out of reach for many. The median listing price in Florida sits around $425,000. Against this backdrop of strained affordability, let's ask the key question: what happens to the price of an asset when you permanently erase a major recurring cost of holding it? The answer, according to a first-of-its-kind user cost model from the Realtor.com economic research team, is precise and staggering. Their analysis, which calculates how future expenses are capitalized into an asset's present value, projects that eliminating homestead property taxes would cause an immediate, overnight spike of 7 to 9% in home values. This isn't speculation about future growth, it's a fundamental repricing of every single primary home. Let's make those numbers concrete. On that median $425,000 home, a 7% jump adds $29,750 in instant, untaxed paper wealth. A 9% jump adds $38,250. Statewide, this injects $200 to $250 billion into the total value of owner-occupied housing. As Realtor.com senior economist Joel Berner, who conducted the analysis, states, it would be a boon to existing property owners. The economic logic is ironclad. Lower the lifetime cost of ownership, and the market value rises today. This moment defines the winners and losers with brutal clarity. The winner's circle is exclusive. You must already own a home to get in. Current homeowners get an equity bonus. Those who bought at the peak and may have seen paper losses could be made whole. Retirees on fixed incomes would see living costs drop. However, the source of this wealth transfer is critical. It comes directly from the increased market entry price for future buyers. The losers are clearly defined. First, future first-time home buyers. They already face a market 42% above pre-pandemic levels. This policy slaps an extra 7 to 9% premium on their entry ticket, pushing the dream further out of reach. Second, and profoundly, renters. Here's the critical, often overlooked twist. The plan only exempts homesteads. Taxes on rental properties remain. Landlords, facing this unchanged business expense, will inevitably pass the cost to tenants through higher rents. Berner calls the overall effect a highly regressive tax, one that would disproportionately benefit wealthy Floridians at the expense of those who don't own homes. A retiree in a paid-off home sees their net worth jump and expenses fall. A young family renting faces higher rent, making it harder to save for a now more expensive down payment. The wealth gap accelerates. This leads to the colossal question: how does Florida replace the revenue? Property taxes aren't arbitrary. They fund the bedrock of local communities: public schools, police and fire departments, road maintenance, libraries, and parks. Eliminating this stream for homesteads creates a multi-billion-dollar annual hole. DeSantis's plan to shift to sales, corporate, and non-homestead property taxes creates a dangerously narrow and volatile revenue base. It makes funding for your child's school or your local fire station dependent on tourism spending, the stock market's effect on corporate profits, and the financial health of out-of-state vacationers. This systemic vulnerability is what worries economists most. Housing economist Ken Johnson of the University of Mississippi warns of a potential black swan event. Florida's market is unique, with vacation/second homes making up roughly 10% of its housing stock, a huge concentration. These properties remain fully taxable under the plan. Johnson's scenario is precise. During the next national recession, owners of these discretionary properties will look to cut costs and sell. This would cause a sudden, massive flood of supply onto the market amid falling demand, crashing prices. Simultaneously, the state's narrow tax base would collapse. Tourism drops, corporate profits fall, sales tax revenue shrinks. As Johnson starkly puts it, a major U.S. recession could crash Florida housing and at the same time dry up the Florida budget. The policy designed to protect homeowners could, under stress, trigger a cascade that destroys equity and cripples public services simultaneously. It's important to note the political context. There are currently 7 proposed constitutional amendments in the legislature. Some are less sweeping, like only eliminating non-school property taxes. Berner estimates that version could still boost values by 4% to 5.5%. However, DeSantis has criticized a piecemeal approach, favoring one clear amendment for total elimination, potentially on the 2026 ballot. So, is this a revolution or a gamble? The trade-offs are extreme. It promises immediate relief for a specific group, current homeowners, by imposing higher costs on non-owners and risking long-term fiscal stability. It solves for today's affordability crisis for owners by exacerbating tomorrow's for everyone else. The debate forces a fundamental choice. Is the immediate financial benefit for property owners worth potentially higher rents, a more difficult path to home ownership for the next generation, and a state budget perpetually walking a high wire dependent on the constant boom of outside money? The coming debate will define Florida's economic and social landscape for decades. It's a complex equation of freedom, equity, and risk. What do you think? Is eliminating property taxes a good idea, or does it create more problems than it solves? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful, smash that like button, subscribe for more clear-eyed analysis, and hit the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Thanks for watching. Smash that like button, Subscribe for more clear-eyed analysis and hit the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Thanks for watching.